In the endless scroll of digital existence, where faces flash by like lightning strikes against the darkness of our screens, there exists a profound mystery that most people never stop to examine. While millions desperately compete for visual attention, uploading their expressions to an audience of strangers, there moves among us a different breed of human being. One who chooses the shadows not from fear but from wisdom. These are not the broken, the damaged, or the socially anxious. Despite what popular psychology might suggest, these are individuals who have discovered something revolutionary about human identity, that presence doesn't require presentation, that worth doesn't demand witness, and that the deepest truths about who we are cannot be captured in any frame, no matter how perfectly lit or expertly angled. The psychology of those who refuse to post their photographs begins with a fundamental reconstruction of how identity forms and sustains itself. While the majority of our contemporary world has become addicted to what psychologists term external identity validation, measuring self-worth through digital applause, social metrics, and the reflected opinions of strangers, these individuals operate from what researchers call an autonomous identity framework. Their sense of self doesn't fluctuate with algorithmic approval or disappear in the absence of public acknowledgement. It grows from what Carl Jung would have recognized as a healthy relationship with the inner witness, the part of consciousness that observes, evaluates, and integrates experience, without needing external confirmation of its validity. This creates a psychological phenomenon that borders on the revolutionary in our current cultural moment. Complete emotional independence from the opinion economy that drives most social media behavior. They don't need to be seen to feel significant, don't require documentation to believe their experiences matter, and don't seek validation to confirm their existence has meaning. When someone operates from this level of psychological autonomy, the compulsion to share one's image simply doesn't activate in their neural pathways. The dopamine circuits that drive addictive scrolling and posting behaviors remain dormant, because the reward system is oriented toward internal satisfaction rather than external stimulation. These individuals typically possess what could be described as psychological depth perception, an intuitive ability to sense the emotional, intellectual, and spiritual dimensions of any experience, while remaining relatively uninterested in its surface manifestations. When they enter a space, their awareness naturally gravitates toward atmospheric qualities, relational dynamics, and subtle energetic shifts that others might completely overlook. This creates a fascinating cognitive bias towards substance over style, meaning over appearance, essence over image. They process the world through what phenomenologists call lived experience, the rich, multi-layered reality of being human that exists beneath and beyond what any camera could capture. For these individuals, attempting to represent themselves through photography feels like trying to express a symphony through a single note, like attempting to convey the vastness of an ocean through a single drop of water. The medium itself seems inadequate to the complexity of what they know themselves to be. This isn't photophobia or camera shyness. It's a sophisticated understanding that visual representation inevitably involves reduction, that every image tells only a fraction of any story, and that some truths are too complex, too nuanced, too alive to be frozen in digital amber. Perhaps the most psychologically fascinating aspect of photo-averse individuals involves their relationship with what researchers call intimacy sovereignty, the conscious management of who has access to different levels of personal information, including visual access to their physical presence. These individuals often demonstrate an intuitive understanding of something that most people never consciously consider. Once an image enters the digital ecosystem, it ceases to belong to the person it depicts. It becomes public property, subject to interpretation, manipulation, judgment, and projection by anyone with internet access, regardless of their relationship to or understanding of the subject. This awareness creates what psychologists term protective vulnerability, the ability to be emotionally open and authentic while maintaining careful boundaries around exposure to unearned judgment or unwanted interpretation. They can share their deepest thoughts, their most profound insights, their most personal struggles, while simultaneously protecting their visual identity from the chaos of public opinion. This isn't emotional withholding or defensive behavior. It's sophisticated boundary management that recognizes the difference between intimacy and exposure, between trust and naivety, between openness and recklessness. Their face becomes something sacred, something earned through relationship, rather than freely distributed to strangers who have invested nothing in understanding who they truly are. Many photo-averse individuals naturally adopt what could be characterized as an anthropological stance toward contemporary digital culture. They observe the rituals of social media self-presentation, with the fascination of researchers studying an unfamiliar civilization, noting patterns, analyzing motivations, and seeking to understand the deeper needs being expressed through these behaviors. This observer position grants them unique insights into human nature, while simultaneously creating emotional distance from the need to participate in what they perceive as performative behaviors. They're not judging others for their choices. They're simply operating from a different psychological framework that makes such choices feel unnecessary or inauthentic. This anthropological perspective often reveals itself in their conversations, where they demonstrate unusual insight into social dynamics, cultural trends, and the psychological motivations driving various forms of online behavior. They understand the game without feeling compelled to play it. Photo-averse individuals often hold a distinctly different relationship with time, memory, and the preservation of experience. While photographs function as external memory storage devices, freezing moments in digital permanence, these individuals prefer their memories to remain internal, fluid, and personally meaningful. They understand something profound about the nature of experience, that some moments are more beautiful when they're allowed to live once, and then transform into cherished private memories, evolving and deepening over time through the alchemy of reflection and integration. This creates what phenomenologists call experiential living, a psychological state where the focus remains on inhabiting moments fully rather than capturing them for later consumption. They're not trying to create content, they're trying to create meaning. They're not building a visual archive, they're cultivating a rich internal landscape of memories that belong entirely to them. This temporal philosophy often extends to a broader understanding of impermanence and the beauty of transient experiences. They appreciate sunsets more fully because they're not trying to photograph them, engage in conversations more deeply because they're not documenting them, and connect with others more authentically because they're not performing for an invisible audience. Perhaps no psychological trait is more characteristic of photo-averse individuals than what could be called the authenticity imperative, an internal mechanism that creates discomfort whenever they're asked to engage in behavior that feels artificial, performative, or misaligned with their genuine emotional state. This isn't perfectionism in the conventional sense of demanding flawless appearance or performance. It's what the existentialist would recognize as authentic being, a commitment to existing in harmony with one's actual thoughts, feelings, and values rather than adapting oneself to meet external expectations or social pressures. When someone operates from this authenticity imperative, the act of posing for a photograph, crafting a caption, or curating an online image feels psychologically jarring. It requires them to step outside their natural mode of being and adopt a role that doesn't reflect their inner experience. The discomfort isn't about how they look. It's about how the entire process feels. This creates an interesting paradox. They often have rich, complex, fascinating inner lives, but refuse to translate these into visual content, because the translation process itself feels like a betrayal of their authentic nature. They'd rather remain invisible than be misrepresented, even if the misrepresentation is their own creation. Many individuals who avoid posting photographs demonstrate high levels of what psychologists call empathic sensitivity, and heightened ability to perceive and absorb emotional information from their environment, including the emotional states of others. This sensitivity creates a natural protective instinct around exposure to potential judgment, criticism, or negative projection. They understand, often at a visceral level, that posting one's image online opens a doorway to emotional experiences they cannot control or predict. Comments, reactions, and even silent judgments from viewers can create energetic disturbances that highly sensitive individuals find overwhelming or disruptive to their emotional equilibrium. This isn't social anxiety or fear of rejection. It's energetic self-care. They recognize that their emotional resources are finite and prefer to invest them in chosen relationships and meaningful activities, rather than managing the unpredictable emotional fallout from public exposure. This sensitivity often extends to a deep awareness of how images can be misinterpreted, taken out of context, or used in ways the original poster never intended. They understand that digital permanence means today's casual selfie could become tomorrow's source of regret, misunderstanding, or professional liability. While most people in the digital age construct their identity through what researchers call visual autobiography, a chronological series of images documenting their journey through life. Photo-averse individuals build what psychologists term narrative identity. Their sense of self emerges from the stories they tell themselves about their experiences, growth, challenges, and evolution as human beings. They track their development through internal milestones rather than external ones. Moments of insight, periods of growth, challenges overcome, wisdom gained, relationships deepened, understanding expanded. These psychological markers feel far more significant than any photograph could capture because they represent genuine transformation rather than surface documentation. This narrative approach to identity creates remarkable psychological resilience. Their sense of self doesn't depend on maintaining a particular image or living up to past representations of themselves. Instead, it flows and evolves naturally as they continue to learn, grow, and change. One of the most fascinating aspects of photo-averse psychology involves what could be called the presence paradox, the way these individuals often command more attention and create deeper connections, precisely because they don't seek visual validation or try to create an online presence. When someone remains partially hidden, others tend to pay closer attention to their words, ideas, energy, and the quality of their engagement. The absence of visual distraction creates psychological space for deeper connection and more meaningful interaction. People find themselves listening more carefully, thinking more deeply about what's being shared, and connecting with the essence of the person rather than their appearance. This creates what researchers term essential presence, a way of being that communicates authenticity, depth, and substance without relying on visual cues or performative behaviors. Others often report feeling drawn to these individuals, sensing something real and grounded about them that transcends superficial attraction or social positioning. Many photo-averse individuals naturally embrace what could be characterized as conscious digital engagement, a thoughtful, intentional approach to technology use that prioritizes meaningful connection over metrics-driven interaction. They use social platforms as tools for learning, sharing ideas, and maintaining relationships, rather than as vehicles for self-promotion or validation seeking. This conscious approach creates a healthier relationship with technology. Overall, they're significantly less likely to experience social media, anxiety, comparison syndrome, fear of missing out, or the dopamine addiction cycles that plague many heavy users. Their digital presence becomes an extension of their values, rather than a separate performance space disconnected from their authentic selves. They often report feeling more present in their actual lives, because they're not constantly thinking about how experiences might translate into content, how moments might be documented, or how their activities might appear to others. This creates a psychological freedom that allows for deeper engagement with whatever they're actually doing. Perhaps most importantly, photo-averse individuals demonstrate an intuitive understanding of what psychologists call strategic vulnerability, the ability to build deep, meaningful relationships through carefully chosen sharing rather than indiscriminate broadcasting of personal information. They create stronger bonds with fewer people by being intentional about what they reveal and when. This selective approach to personal disclosure creates what researchers term earned intimacy, relationships where trust develops gradually through mutual respect, understanding, and demonstrated care rather than immediate exposure or premature revelation. When they do choose to share something personal, including occasionally their image, it carries significant weight and meaning. The rarity of such sharing makes it precious, creating moments of genuine connection rather than routine content consumption. Photo-averse individuals often demonstrate what could be called temporal wisdom, an unusual ability to think several steps ahead about the potential long-term consequences of digital actions. They understand that online behavior creates permanent records, that contexts change over time, and that today's casual post could become tomorrow's source of professional, personal, or social complications. This creates what researchers term digital foresight, the capacity to evaluate present choices based on their potential future implications, rather than their immediate gratification potential. They prefer to err on the side of caution, maintaining control over their digital narrative by limiting what becomes part of the permanent public record. This long-term thinking extends to their understanding of personal growth and change. They recognize that who they are today may be quite different from who they become in 5 or 10 years, and they don't want to be locked into outdated self-representations that no longer reflect their current reality or values. Finally, and perhaps most significantly, Photo-averse individuals often cultivate exceptionally rich, complex, and sophisticated inner lives. Because they don't rely on external validation or digital feedback loops for emotional satisfaction, they develop more advanced relationships with solitude, reflection, self-discovery, and internal growth. They tend to read more extensively, think more deeply about complex issues, engage in longer periods of contemplation and self-reflection, and develop more nuanced understanding of themselves, others, and the world around them. Their avoidance of photo sharing isn't a psychological limitation. It's a conscious choice that frees up time, energy, and attention for internal development and authentic relationship building. This internal richness often makes them fascinating conversationalists, insightful friends, and valuable colleagues. They bring depth, perspective, and genuine presence to their interactions because they've invested in developing these qualities rather than focusing on their external presentation. In our current historical moment, photo-averse individuals represent a quiet but significant form of cultural resistance to what sociologists call the commodification of personal identity. They refuse to treat themselves as brands, their faces as products, their lives as content to be consumed by strangers, or their experiences as raw material for social media engagement. This isn't antisocial behavior, it's pro-authentic behavior. They're not rejecting human connection. They're insisting on meaningful human connection. They're not avoiding engagement with the world. They're choosing to engage on their own terms, rather than accepting the terms dictated by algorithmic capitalism and attention economy dynamics. Their resistance is mostly silent, personal, and non-confrontational, but it carries profound implications for how we understand human identity, social connection, and psychological well-being in the digital age. They demonstrate that it's possible to live fully, connect deeply, and contribute meaningfully without participating in the constant performance of self that characterizes much of contemporary social media culture. The most profound truth about people who don't post their photographs is that they understand something many have forgotten in our image-saturated culture. That visibility doesn't equal value, attention doesn't equal worth, and being seen doesn't make you real. They operate from a place of internal validation that makes external validation unnecessary rather than frightening. They move through the world with a quiet confidence that comes from knowing who they are without needing others to confirm it through likes, comments, or social feedback. They engage with life from the inside out rather than the outside in, creating authentic experiences rather than curated ones, building genuine relationships rather than performing for audiences. Their psychology reveals something beautiful and essential about human nature. We are capable of finding profound meaning, deep connection, and lasting joy without constantly performing ourselves for others. We can be powerfully present without being visible, deeply impactful without being seen, and authentically connected without being digitally exposed. In a world increasingly obsessed with surface appearances and instant gratification, these individuals serve as quiet reminders that the most important aspects of human experience, our capacity for growth, wisdom, love, creativity, and authentic connection, remain beautifully invisible to cameras, but powerfully real to those who learn to perceive with more than their eyes. They are not the absent ones in our digital age. They are the present ones fully engaged with life itself, rather than its documentation, fully committed to authentic relationship, rather than performed interaction, fully alive in ways that no photograph could ever capture, contain, or adequately convey. Their choice to remain photographically invisible is not a statement of fear, inadequacy, or social dysfunction. It's a declaration of psychological independence. Independence from the tyranny of external validation, freedom from the exhausting performance of digital identity, liberation from the endless cycle of seeking approval from strangers who will never truly know them. They have discovered something revolutionary about human existence, that the most meaningful life is often the most private one, that the deepest connections happen beyond the reach of cameras, and that the truest expressions of human nature occur in moments too sacred, too complex, too authentically alive to be reduced to pixels on a screen dot. In their quiet refusal to commodify their image, they preserve something precious about human dignity, authentic relationship, and the magnificent invisible dimensions of consciousness that make us who we truly are beneath all the roles we play and all the faces we show the world.